The arid landscape of the American West had been settled, and hidden beneath the scrubland lay the bones of the greatest animals to have ever walked the earth. And two men set their sights on discovering them, but first, they had to destroy each other. This is the story of the Bone Wars. Hello and welcome to Remember, the show all about histories, mysteries, and reputation destruction. It's always been about that, isn't it obvious?
Always been about that.
Who should we take down next? The Duke of Wellington's a bigamist.
Take him down.
I'm joined by Paula Deming, and this is off the record, but I heard she doesn't return shopping carts. She just pushes them into empty parking spaces while smoking crack cocaine.
I don't care so much about the insinuation about the crack cocaine. I would never be the kind of person who just leaves a shopping cart. I'm the person who fixes everyone else's messed up shopping cart, putting it properly in the corral, grumbling about how lazy everyone is. So that's an insight into me and what gets my blood boiling. But sure, yeah, crack cocaine, that's fine.
And I'm Matthew Jude, and if anyone hears anything about me that sounds untoward, I'd like to preemptively say that in my defense, that horse owed me money. Last episode, we talked about Mary Hanson, the British woman who fought adversity and even perhaps society to follow her passion and profession, becoming one of the most important paleontologists and geologists in Britain. This week takes us now across the Atlantic to America, where two men are both also hunting for bones, but first, they'd really like to destroy each other.
I mean, yeah, totally. Makes sense. Men. Ooh.
Paula, when I say bone wars to you, what's the first image that comes to mind?
Honestly, I'm not very mature, so I giggle first, and then I think about probably like people with like giant femurs beating each other over the head with them. Yeah.
Well, the Bone Wars is the name given to the exploits that surround the lives of two men, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. Both of those names I have issues with. Edward Drinker Cope sounds like a self-diagnosis, and Othniel?
Othniel, not Nathaniel?
Othniel. I did look it up. Othniel is the first of the 12 judges listed in the Book of Judges, along with Shamgar, which is the best name on the list.
Good old biblical names. Also, I did think at first that you said Edward Drinker Coke, and that was even more like, he drinks Coke. He's just a walking advertisement. See, his parents couldn't afford to take care of him when they had him, so they sold the right to his name to the Coca-Cola company. So he is the version of like a NASCAR driver's uniform, but just in his name.
This is my brother John, and this is my nephew, Pepsi.
Oh, and this is our cousin Sprite, a thirst quencher.
Othniel Marsh was born in 1831 in Lockport, New York. His father was a farmer, but his mother, Mary Gaines Peabody, was the sister of George Peabody, the same Peabody the award is named after, the wealthy banker and philanthropist. However, she died of cholera when he was 3. His uncle paid for his fine education, private schools in Yale, then Berkeley scholarship.
Must be nice.
Must be nice. I hate it.
I can't wait to be rich enough to just like have a well-respected award named after me just because I had the money to fund it.
He's able then to carry on a further education where he traveled to Berlin, Heidelberg, and Breslau, and with his master's degree, returned to the US in 1866 to become the first professor of paleontology in America, a position he held also at Yale.
I mean, that's pretty impressive, so
I feel like the doors to life were somewhat open to him.
It's easier to be impressive when you don't have to worry about how you're going to pay for it. I will say that.
But it is. I mean, it's obviously he's an impressive man. And with a huge donation from his uncle, that same year, the Peabody Museum of Natural History at Yale was founded, where Marsh was able to serve as not only a trustee, but as one of its 3 original curators.
And then he went, you know what this place needs?
Bones.
More bones. I shall go to war over filling my museum with bones. Is that what's next in your paragraph?
Not quite. But on the other hand, we have Edward Drinker Cope, which sounds like a sentence describing a British drunk. He was born in 1840 to a family of Quakers, a fairly well-off family in Pennsylvania. The family had 8 acres of gardens upon which his interest in animals and artistic abilities flourished. He was schooled at the Friends Boarding School. Quakers are also known as the Society of Friends. And it's Cope who's described as a spoiled and lonely, frankly, average person, but with a passion for biology. He wanted to become a scientist, which was not the path his farmer father wanted for him, who wanted him to become, any guesses?
A farmer?
A farmer, correct, Paula.
Yes, I get a point.
So Cope did both. He worked on his father's farm while he also worked part-time at the Academy of Natural Sciences, reclassifying...
And he coped by drinking as he tried to meet his family expectations.
That is foreshadowing. Anyway, he spends a lot of his time cataloguing specimens and immediately started publishing works of science. The farm his dad had bought him to work on, he instead rented out and used the money to fund his studies, which is smart.
Honestly, it is smart.
His study too would take him to Germany, where he would find a like-minded friend, as one day Cope and Marsh fatefully meet.
Oh, a meet cute. Or is it a meet hate? Do they like each other at first or hate each other at first?
They like each other at first.
Oh, it's a meet cute. Good.
A couple of things to note before all this goes down. The American West was still a dangerous place to be, but it was now connected by trains. For example, the Apache Wars were very much still to come in Arizona and New Mexico. Red Cloud's War, the Black Hills War, the Battle of Little Bighorn. This was the American West that our paleontologists were going to step out to hunting for fossils. It's 2 different worlds. You don't see paleontologists in any of the Westerns.
But it was happening.
This is fully Western times.
Dinosaurs causing wars.
What makes the American West so good for finding large, impressive finds is firstly, they were there. But unlike much of the world where fossils were being found, the West had been both seismically active and arid.
Yeah.
It's dry enough for preservation. It really was the best place in the world to go big, dead game hunting. But the scientific importance wasn't just finding new and cool dinosaurs. I mean, it helped that Marsh and Cope were hunting. It helped that, admittedly, it was cool. Really, the problem being solved was in adding proof to Darwin's newfound claims, that of the origin of species and evolution. They were hoping to find the links that prove that over time, life evolves from life.
You're looking at me like I'm supposed to say something.
Sometimes you say something wildly outlandish here, Paula, where I'm like, okay.
What? You thought
Christian indoctrination is heavy on this time.
I'll be honest. You started talking about evolution, and I did start thinking about the paper I wrote in 9th grade biology about evolution versus, we had to do like a scientific, I don't know why I wrote it on this, but it was literally evolution versus creationism. And I was thinking about how my own personal religious beliefs fed into that paper, and how much a person can just like change in a few years. Not that I necessarily disagree with anything I wrote in that paper, I guess, but the way I did well. I got like extra credit on it. It was very well researched and cited. She gave me like 115. She gave me like extra points. And I don't think it was because she was religious. I think she was impressed with how I researched and compared things. But I was like, evolution, they say that blah, blah, blah. That's how I learned about the second law of thermodynamics. Anyway, I was thinking about that paper, and that's why I didn't say anything, because I was like, would I be embarrassed by that now? Or would I think it held up? Don't know. Anyway, that's that.
In 1888, 1868. Marsh was the one who saw the potential in the West as the best place to find what he was looking for. So he made it his business to return. In many ways, think of them as miners. They were out looking for prospects where they could stake a claim, where they could go and dig to strike some scientific gold. I mean, a good place to find bones was also in a mine, but that's besides the point. The reality was that if you strike gold, you don't want to tell anyone else where you did it.
Right.
And you certainly will do anything it takes to protect your claim. Another thing to remember is that the evolution thing was to a lot of people pretty darn blasphemous.
Yeah, there was a lot of, I mean, maybe this is something to talk about later, but there was a whole, there was a whole court case about whether or not it could be, taught in schools and all kinds of stuff, yeah. People really saw it as something that flew in the face of the Bible, but...
It's an affront. It's an affront to God in many ways.
Yeah, but if you really look... God and science don't have to contradict each other, but that's my modern take on it.
Many people believe that it challenged the Bible story of creation. What seems commonplace now to us, I mean, we teach our children about dinosaurs because they are cool. At the time, it was, though, cutting edge, bold and dangerous science. Paleontology in the 1860s was to the world what splitting the atom was in the 1940s, or whatever the hell they're doing at CERN today. So we have O.C. Marsh and Edward Cope meeting in Germany. Marsh, slightly older, more educated, a distinguished man of school and science, and Cope, a younger, perhaps somewhat spoiled, but quite brilliant son of a farmer who had already proved himself in the field. And it's there one night, as the rest of the camp was hushed in darkness, maybe a couple drinks too many, in a tent in the back, lit dimly by candlelight.
The Bone Wars really begin.
No, there are similarities.
Wow, you're setting up such a scene.
Their similarities were there, right? But it's their differences that are going to prevail. One way to think about this is that O.C. Marsh was a business scientist, making a name, making money, cutthroat, ruthless. A lot of scientists were and are like this.
Gotta fill that museum with something.
And I want my name on everything that's in the museum.
Yeah.
Cope was not like this, to begin with. He was much more of a gentleman naturalist with Quaker roots. This is much more of a... Think of it as like a British style of, we've got no government funding. We're all in it together trying to work out things and we're going to share our work. That's just, you've got to think of Marsh, on the other hand. He's like a robber baron, They're very different people. So the younger Cope had been involved with a hadrosaur. Not romantically.
I'm saying, I'm turning everything into it's less of a bone war, more of a boning war, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, everybody?
This hadrosaur had been found and was the first publicly displayed large dinosaur. And Marsh contacted his new friends and asked to see where this has been found. And it's been a quarry in New Jersey.
Oh.
So it's then that Marsh, with his contacts, essentially takes control of the bones coming from the New Jersey quarry, leaving Cope out in the cold.
Sorry, Cope, not sorry. Cope with this, Cope. That's what he said. Cope with this.
This is the first of what will be many dick moves. Then Cope is involved in reconstruction of this Elasmosaurus, a big, long...
I feel like we need to get like a 6-year-old to come in and say these dinosaur names for you.
My friend's son is actually 5 and he knows all the dinosaurs, I'll tell you that much.
The people who are best at pronouncing dinosaur names are 5 and 6-year-olds. That is scientific fact.
Well, this is a big, long sea creature. Only Cope had made a mistake. He put the head on the wrong end, and it was it's a really simple mistake, a long tail and a long neck, essentially. And Cope had made a mistake, and Marsh pounced on it. O.C. Marsh knew that the diagram was wrong, and so Marsh made sure that everyone in the community knew that Cope was a big dummy.
You big dummy, you fraudster. But this kind of thing is not actually helping their cause, because if you're already doubting the truth of prehistoric animals, coming out and being like, well, look, they don't even know which side the head goes on, which means it might not even be real. So really, he is hurting overall the legitimacy of this field by even doing that. It's so petty.
And Marsh hadn't seen a big dummy. What he's seen is that Cope was his biggest threat and rival.
Yeah.
Marsh, along with Cope's access to bones, also wanted to take away his reputation. It's like, you found this dinosaur in the marsh, I'm taking over the marsh. You got this wrong, I'm going to destroy your reputation about it.
Why not just work together? Come on, dude.
They just cannot see eye to eye. They're different men. Marsh is just, he's an industrialist, and Cope is a naturalist, and they're just not going to see eye to eye. And the Bone Wars had well and truly begun. By the early 1870s, Marsh was now heading to the arid west to start prospecting for bones. He took a bunch of students out. They essentially dressed like cowboys. Their first guide was Buffalo Bill, for God's sake.
That's so cool.
It is pretty cool. This was, frankly, though, it was a dangerous thing to be doing, but they go in search of glory, and that's what they get, because they find a lot of dinosaurs. And as far as Marsh is concerned, the West was his. All of it. No one else's.
Marsh.
Now, Marsh has the money and backing of Yale to do these digs. Edward Cope did not. Remember, he's a gentleman naturalist,
Right.
and his Philadelphia colleagues didn't have the money for exploration. They relied on donation. But Cope feels that he needs to go out west. He has this friend, the man who picks up stones running, as the Sioux called him, geologist Ferdinand Hayden.
That's a cool name.
Well, he's a geologist. I imagine he was
Yeah.
picking up stones and running off with them, you know?
It's just like, it's a very evocative name, right? Like I can picture it.
And he says he'll help organize an expedition if he can make his way out west, which Cope straight away does, and making his way to a place called Bridger in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
The crew Hayden had promised was gone by the time he gets there, so Cope just grabs anyone in town that will help him and starts paying for things out of his own money.
Hey, you want to see a dead body? It's real dead, and it's buried under the ground. It's an animal, and it's only bones.
It's very dead.
It's so dead. It's been dead for so long.
And Marsh is furious. He finds out that Cope is in the West.
I have a feeling, too, if you think back to our Donner Party episode, Bridger, Wyoming, Fort Bridger. This is a likely very much near stop along the way that the Donners had previously taken.
Of course. Yeah, it'd be the same trail. It'd be the same place, the same breaking off point. To make things slightly more complicated, there's also another guy, Joseph Leidy, who was another paleontologist out for a good time looking for bones. So all three men are now in the West, and all three men happen to be discovering the same thing at the same time. A big, weird monster unseen by anyone.
It's just such a shame that the West is so small, you know, that there's not room for all of them to just do their own thing.
Exactly. They all want to name it, so they all try to get their publication out first, regardless of how good the publication is. They just need to get it in the papers, a picture, a sketch of this skull and their name next to it, and then it's theirs. It's actually Joseph Leidy who wins, naming it the... Oh, God.
The Leidiosaurus?
No, it's the... It starts with two vowels. Unitherium robustrium.
Why?
It's the beast of the Unita Mountains, essentially is what it means.
Okay, got it.
Uinta. I don't know how to say it.
That's weird. Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that, but sure. Okay.
What follows is what I actually heard described in one source as a documentary I watched. They described it as a taxonomic carpet bombing. Cope and Marsh started discovering new animals at a rate that is essentially impossible. They wrote papers and sent them off claiming to have found new things with new names, but really they had just found one thing that was already this robustrum that Leidy had found. But sometimes the skull is bigger, sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's broken, and they're saying, this is a new thing, this is a new thing, this is from a different animal.
See, again, they're just making it hard to believe this stuff is real because they're fucking around with it. Excuse me, but like,
well, the thing is that all of this has to be undone later on in
Yeah.
history. It's later on they have to go through all this and say, okay, these 75 things, that's just these 2 things. They're making so much work for future generations. It's ridiculous.
more like the Bonehead Wars. Am I right?
Well, it's so petty. They then get into this war of trying to disclaim each other's claims. Even though they were both wrong, Marsh starts publishing a bunch of things just claiming that Cope was a liar.
Oh my God.
Lady, though, is the one that is forced to quit. He's the one that actually made the discovery. But he sees that this war was going to start destroying people, and he's just out. He just wants nothing to do with it.
Yeah, he's like, forget this. This is not, I don't have time for this drama. I'll do something else.
Marsh had the power of the institutions behind him. Thomas Henry Huxley, brother of Brave New World's author Aldous Huxley, comes into the fray. He's in the US to finally see Darwin's theory put into reality, something that Marsh had been working on with a massive series of horse bones that shows evolution through the millennia. It would be miraculous if it wasn't so blasphemous. I'll just mention here that Huxley had an incredible career, but he also was the founder of the X Club,
That sounds ridiculous.
a dining club of 9 men who supported the theories of natural selection and academic liberalism. They also had superpowers, I think.
And inspired Elon Musk.
I actually think it did inspire Elon Musk.
He loves X. He loves putting X on things. So maybe that's where he got it from.
I think it may have inspired Elon Musk, this X Club, because they didn't want to put a name on it because they said that a name would have a leaning of some description that could be distorted. So they just called it the X Club.
X gonna give it to you. What? Give it to you.
First they're going to rock, then they're going to roll, and then hopefully make discoveries after that sometime, I think. Marsh was also able to show perhaps that birds came from reptiles because he had examples of birds with teeth. But birds with teeth will later come back to haunt him.
Uh-oh.
This display of horse bones is really marvelous. It's an amazing look. It's like you can see incremental changes in the bones.
And is it real or is it like faked?
It's real. It's an incredible achievement. Paula and your doubt.
I am slightly skeptical because you can find any old bones and just slap them together and say it's a new thing, as is being proven to me right now by this story. So that's why I'm like, no, wait, is this one real or is this one made up?
Give me strength.
So some of them, I'm not saying they're all faked, but it's possible that any of them could be. So that's all.
And you're doing a history podcast. Fascinating.
I'm not saying that dinosaurs weren't real. I'm saying there's the possibility, as is being proven right now, that not everything we see in museum might be how it was put together in nature.
Get out. I'm just going to take a deep breath. At this time, Cope had come into considerable inheritance.
Oh.
And he decided that if the institutions weren't going to fund him, he's just going to fund himself. So he goes a-digging. Funny thing here is that Cope was a Quaker, so he didn't believe in violence. So he set off to the Western Hills, despite the danger of attack. No one else wanted to go with him. Little Bighorn had just happened. But Cope's success just rolls. Paper after paper, discovery after discovery. Real discoveries. His imagination helped him look at the bones that he found and really tell the story of evolution. In many ways, things were going well. Now, for both men, after they had clashed, they were just kind of staying out of each other's way. But that was about to change. In Colorado, painter Arthur Lakes discovers bones. Not just some bones. The biggest bones ever seen. And both Marsh and Cope want to go to see them and be the ones to do the discovering.
But they are already discovered.
But they weren't named, which is what's important. So they both go, and they both get very angry. And then even bigger and better bones are found back in Wyoming. And again, they both attempt to be the first to get there. This Wyoming site is something else, with Jurassic animals 120 feet long,
Wow.
the size of 20 elephants.
Holy crap. That's crazy. Why aren't there animals that big now? I guess they're in the ocean. I also am picturing, like, whoever actually found these bones has already dug them out and is starting to, like, put them together in, like, a standing formation. And then Cope and Marsh show up and they argue so much over who's going to name it that they start shoving each other. And one of them gets shoved into the bones and the whole thing comes crashing down in a real...
knocks the tiny bone in the knee, just like the little
and
one.
everything goes in a very Looney Tunes fashion, you know?
And he gets eaten by the dinosaur head.
Yes. Just like in Hook.
Exactly like in Hook.
Yeah.
So they're both in Wyoming in 2 separate camps. They start to send spies to each other's camps.
Oh,
Marsh,
God.
when finished with his dig, he orders everything else that's been left to be destroyed. If he's already got a Diplodocus collarbone, no one else needs one. So
This is so...
he doesn't want any others to exist for Cope to find.
I'm sorry, this is not a true scientist. This is an opportunist.
This is the worst of Marsh. This is sacrilegious.
Yeah, I'm just to destroy discoveries so that you can be the only one with them. I don't like him.
A few things are happening now behind the scenes. Marsh is now head of the National Academy of Sciences.
Ooh.
He had power in the government and unending budget and a lot of maneuverability with people, and he decides to use that power to just destroy Cope. Marsh is in charge of the publications now, so Cope is out of the spotlight.
Poor
He goes
Cope.
broke.
Cope goes broke?
Cope has to go get a job at a zoo, and he can't.
He can't get a job at a zoo?
He has to move into a little apartment surrounded by his books and fossils.
And that's where he became the eccentric old man who is in a Indiana Jones movie.
I've seen pictures of Cope's office, and that's exactly what it looks like. To get technical, Marsh is in charge of the surveys now. And he puts into writing that all bones collected using survey money had to be returned to the Smithsonian. This is so that he could take all of Cope's finds off him. This is incredibly important to this story because Cope had always been on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And he had 20 years of receipts and was able to keep literally ledgers of receipts. So he gets to keep all his bones. He gets to keep everything because he actually paid for his own surveys, his own digs. Marsh is so entrenched in this academic world. It's like, I'll just say that's all the survey money. It's like Cope never got any of the survey money. He's been doing this on his own. Marsh doesn't even know this about him. But that doesn't mean that this move from Marsh doesn't make Cope very, very angry. How dare Marsh try to take from him what was rightfully his?
Yeah.
So a brand new battleground opens in the press. Cope goes to the New York Herald to destroy Marsh. Everything you could imagine, accusing him of corruption. And imagine Marsh is a high up person. He's a politician, essentially.
Yeah.
He's very powerful. Corruption, fraud, lying, theft, anything and everything. Marsh comes back with his own accusations, and for weeks people eat it up because it's a great story.
It's fun watching other people's drama. I mean, that's why we watch reality TV.
It's true, and this is the cutting edge of science, and these two great men hate each other. Great story. It's fantastically exciting for people. Not only that they get to see the bones in the newspaper, but they get to hear all this headbutting. And this puts Marsh in the spotlight. And the government start thinking, why the hell are we spending all this money on dinosaurs?
Uh-oh. Chicken's coming home to roost.
Well, it is those birds with teeth.
Uh-oh.
Marsh has a book that was published with government money. The book is called Odontorniths, or essentially these birds with teeth. That's the name of them.
Birds with teeth.
And this is used by the government as almost a way to ridicule this waste of money. And it works. You've got to imagine that a politician that's against all this money being wasted goes and says, we spend all this money on this guy to write books about birds with teeth. I mean, fortunes are being spent on this. And this is what they get in with.
Because they just think it's ridiculous?
You've got to imagine that there's people who just think, so what? Who cares?
Yeah.
I don't care that there's birds with teeth. How does that affect me today and my constituents? It works.
Yeah.
The geological survey budget is slashed. The paleontology department is gone. Marsh is fired in a one-word telegram. He loses everything.
Oh my gosh, they didn't play.
And remember how Marsh had put into place a new rule saying that all bones dug with survey money needed to be sent to the Smithsonian?
Which he doesn't have control over anymore?
Cope paid his own way, but now Marsh himself is the one that's going to have to give up everything he's found.
Turning over all his stuff. That's what you get when you are a dick.
To me, I just feel like they wanted to destroy each other so much. If they could have just got round a table and talked and forgiven each other and accepted that they could just be great men together. Like, Marsh had no idea the kind of man that Cope was. And Cope was no better in many ways. He was more of a gentleman in some ways, but he turned to the press to destroy his rival in the newspapers. Not everything that got said and printed was true.
Yeah, if they were too caught up in competition with each other, they lost sight of what they were supposed to be doing, which was making discoveries that would bring about advancement for society as a whole.
Both Cope and Marsh were done. O.C. Marsh had destroyed Cope, and then with a lot of help from Cope, the government destroyed Marsh. Cope has one last achievement in him. As he sat dying at the age of 56.
Oh my gosh, that's so young.
An artist named Charles Knight wants to use his findings to show what dinosaurs would have really looked like. You know all those pictures, imagining them, how they really would be like in the wild, and he agrees, but after it's done, so is Cope, and he dies alone and paranoid.
Oh.
Essentially, this guy comes to his house and says, hey, I want to make those kind of like sketches that you see of dinosaurs, like here they are drinking from water and birds flying over the top and stuff. And they use Cope's drawings, because Cope was fantastically talented at art. They use his drawings to make it. And it's a wonderful piece. And then 2 years later, Marsh walks home, gets pneumonia, and he's dead as well. Disgraced.
Hey.
And penniless. And the Bone Wars were over because its generals were dead.
The Bone Wars boned the people who fought them.
I thought my line was much more tasteful than your line, if I'm honest.
It was. I just
want to point that out.
It was nice and poetic, but I had to get in a joke, right?
If you want to see Cope's brain...
What? No.
You can. It's in a jar at the Worcester Institute.
No, thank you.
And his skull...
What?
His skull
Why?
is at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology.
I hate it. What the? But like, well, I collect all these bones of all these other dead things, so when I'm dead, you can have my bones.
I kind of think that's fine and fair. Like, you know, well, what isn't fine and fair is that for some reason in 1993, the photographer Louis Siphios borrowed Cope's skull and traveled around America with it and took pictures of it along with the journey.
Like the traveling gnome from freaking commercials.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
yeah, took his skull with him. Just like, I've got Cope's skull with me.
That's weird.
On the other hand, Marsh is buried at Grove Street Cemetery in New Haven, Connecticut. Separately, they were both great men of science, making genuine, real, incredible discoveries. Thousands of papers and articles, books, species discovered. They changed the way we understand the world and its distant past. And just imagine what they could have done if they had done it together.
Probably a lot more. And they would have done a lot less damage to the field of paleontology in the process, I think.
Well, they completely ousted Leedy, who was trying to do the same thing. They got rid of him straight away.
It's just selfish. And it's unfortunate. But it does make for a really good and entertaining story. So I guess we'll thank them for that. Thanks, fellas, for having drama that we can enjoy as a story hundreds of years later.
100 years later.
Well, we're more than 100 away. So I said hundreds, even though it's not actually 200 years later. But you know what I mean. Math. Who cares?
It's like 150 years.
That's almost hundreds. That's halfway to hundreds.
A dozen and somewhat of tens.
This is a history podcast, not a math podcast, and so it's all okay. Thank you so much, Matthew, for researching this and bringing us this story. If you enjoyed this, make sure that you are subscribed wherever you listen. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever, make sure that you're subscribed and leave a rating and review. It really helps when people find the show to see what other people think of it and that other people are enjoying it. And we'd love to collect just as many as we can this year. We'd really like it. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can help out by subscribing to the channel, giving the video a thumbs up, leaving us a comment. What do you think about this episode? These guys, these fellas, what's your favorite dinosaur? Let me know. Mine is Saltopus. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to go into it again. You'll have to listen to the Mary Hanson episode to hear more of that.
Not taking any comments or questions at this time on this subject. Thank you.
Don't at me. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And don't you forget it.